Hi, my name is Opeyemi, and in this video, I want to talk about reactivation automations. I want to explain what they are, and I want to show you how easy it is to create one. So, what's a reactivation automation? A reactivation automation is simply an automated workflow that helps you bring back customers that have stopped using your product. In other words, you create a messaging workflow that helps you win back customers that have stopped using your product. It's important to note that this is different from an activation automation. An activation automation is targeted at customers that were never active. So they signed up, they were never active. That's an activation automation. It's also different from a re-engagement automation. A re-engagement automation is targeted at customers that are about to churn. So you've noticed that these customers, they're not as active as they used to be. You use a re-engagement automation to win them back. But for customers that have churned, they've stopped using your product, you use a reactivation automation to win them back. If we use a food delivery app as an example, an activation automation would mean that I, as a customer, signed up, I didn't use the app at all, and you want to get me to start using the app. That's an activation automation. If I used to be active and maybe my order frequency dropped, maybe from 10 orders every week to 1, then you use a re-engagement automation to try to maybe find out what's wrong and win me back. But if I stopped using it completely, then you use a reactivation automation to win me back. So that's the difference. Reactivation automation is targeted at customers that churned. Re-engagement automation is targeted at customers that are about to churn. And activation automation is targeted at customers that were never active in the first place. Why are reactivation automations important? They're important because they obviously help you reduce churn and increase your revenue. Remember that these are customers that used to be active on your platform. They know their way around. You spent the CAC, the customer acquisition cost, to acquire them in the first place. So maintaining that relationship will always be cheaper than trying to acquire new customers. Again, helps you reduce churn and increase your customer lifetime value. Very, very simple. Now let's get into it proper. How do you design your reactivation automation? There are 2 steps involved here. The first one, of course, is identifying when users churn. For you to be able to engage that churn, you need to even know the users that have churned in the first place. And secondly is engaging them to win them back. We'll talk more about the engagement bits in the next video. In this video, we'll just focus on the identification part. How do you identify users that churn? So identifying when users churn. To be able to identify when users churn, you need to know when they are active in the first place. To be able to know when they are active, you need to track an event that tells you the user is active. I'll say that again. To be able to know when users churn, you need to know when they are active. To be able to know when they are active, you need to track an event that tells you they are active. And this event is called an activation event. Very, very important to also know that it doesn't necessarily need to be a single event. It could be multiple events. And this will depend on what your product is or what your app is all about. And I'll give examples. For a food delivery app, the goal of a food delivery app is to ensure that customers place orders, right? What that means is that the activation event for a food delivery app would be placing orders. Meaning that when customers place orders, they are active. I'll give an example. If you look at a movie streaming app, Netflix, for example, an activation event would be watching a movie. Rest of whatever other events you're tracking, login, sign-ups, rating a movie, searching a movie, and all of that, the core event that tells you users are actually doing what you expect them to do would be watching a movie. Okay, and that is your activation event. And like I said, this could be more than one. If you look at Instagram, for example, activation events for Instagram could be either making a post or watching a post, because not everyone will post, and some people will just come to Instagram to watch. and that doesn't mean they are not active. So it could be either you're making a post or watching a post or watching posts, right? So the first thing you want to do is to define an activation event. Look at what the core of your product is about. What does your product do? What is the 1, 2, 3 things that you want users to do? When they do it, you know that yes, they are active. You need to define that as your activation event or your activation events. The second thing is that you need to define what is called a dormancy period. A dormancy period is a wait time where you are able to say if this activation event or events do not happen, then it means that the users have churned. They are no longer active. In the case of our food ordering, for example, you can say if a customer has not ordered in 60 days or in 30 days, it means that the customer is no longer active. If a customer has not watched a movie in 30 days, it means that the customer is not active. Again, the dormancy period will depend on what your product is, what the activation event is. Another very interesting thing about dormancy period is it doesn't have to be fixed across your customers. What you can do is to tier your customers based on the frequency of activation events and then create separate levels of dormancy period. I'll explain. For customers that order every day, the dormancy period can be long, meaning that if customers order every day, if they've not ordered for a week, it means that something is not right. So the dormancy period can be a week. For customers that order maybe once every week, the dormancy period can't be a week because they order just once every week. So in that case, the dormancy period will probably be maybe 3-4 weeks or something like that. So what you can do, I mean, again, this is like a level ahead of simple, but it's important to also note. So what you can do is to tier your customers based on frequency of the activation events and define dormancy period for those tiers. One of the things you can do when creating your segment on Engage is you can use the frequency of the activation event to create those segments. Now, the third thing is that once you've defined your activation event, you've defined the dormancy periods, you can then track the events across the different touch points, which I assume you're already doing anyway. So if, for example, your customers are ordering on mobile, on phone, on web, you are tracking those events from those different points so that irrespective of where the event is happening, it's coming into a single source and you are able to get the event from the different places. So you've defined your activation event, you've defined your dormancy period, you're tracking your events across the different touch points. The last thing you want to do is to then create your dynamic segment based on the non-occurrence of the activation event over the dormancy period. What that simply means is that you are creating a user group, a dynamic user group, based on the fact that this activation event you've defined or this activation events you've defined has not occurred over your dormancy period. These users have not placed an order over this period of time. And what we refer to dynamic segments, the reason we say dynamic is because whatever solution you are using to do your lifecycle management, customer lifecycle management, or to do your marketing automation or do all of this, will automatically, and that is why it's dynamic, will automatically add and remove people. So you create the conditions once and the solution will add people and remove people from that segment automatically, from that user group automatically. You don't need to do anything else. Okay, it's automatically managed for you. And this is what that looks like. So this is a sample account for a movie streaming app. You can see that under events, I have a couple of events logged in as an event, onboarded, rated movie. For rated movie, I have a couple of properties, the rating, the title of the movie. I have search. Okay, I have signed up and I have watched movie. And like I explained, for a movie streaming app, my activation event would be watched movie because that's what tells me that the user is actually active. When users log in, yes, it's fine, but logging in doesn't mean they are active. They can log in, but if they are not watching movies, then they are not doing what I want them to do. So if I've defined watched movie as my activation event, it means that I can come to segments and I can create a segment for people that have not watched movie over a period of time. So I can call this churned customers and say where the event watched movie has now occurred over how many days? Say 10 days. Okay, sorry, this should be has not occurred, not has occurred. So the event watched movie has now occurred within the last 10 days. So I can do this, and once I create this segment, Engage automatically adds and remove customers based on that, on those conditions. I don't need to do anything else, and from here I can then plug this segment to an automation that helps me engage the customers, which is what we'll talk about in the next video. So in summary, to identify when users churn, you need to know when they are active. To know when they are active, you need to define what is called an activation event or activation events. You need to define dormancy period. You need to track the activation event across the different touch points, and you need to then create a dynamic segment based on the non-occurrence of the activation event over the dormancy period. And I have like hypothetical examples here. So a food delivery app, for example, the activation event could be ordered food. The dormancy period could be, say, 60 days. These are hypothetical. The dormancy period will of course be different. The activation events might also be different. For a movie streaming app, the activation event will probably be watched movie. The dormancy period may be around 60 days thereabouts. For a digital bank, it could be as a customer received money, transferred money, or made a payment within a 90-day period, right? So you can do that. One thing I didn't show you on Engage is that you can create your segment based on multiple activation events. So if, for example, we are using watched movie as our activation event, we can say watched movie has now occurred over a date, over a particular period of time, so say 60 days. We can then add another condition to say, or this event called, this is just an example, say we are using logged in, right, as also now called over a 30-day period. So you can use multiple activation events to also create your dynamic segment, and that is how you do it on Engage. These are just examples. The next part, of course, after you've created your segment, is then creating your workflow to win them back. The reason it's important to create our segment is because whatever marketing automation solution or tool you're using will continue to update it for you, add and remove customers as necessary, which is very important. You can then plug that into your workflow, which is your engagement workflow that you then use to, engage these churned customers and win them back. And the process of winning them back is just creating messaging workflows to let them know you're still there. Maybe offer discounts and promotions, and try to engage them through other channels like push, SMS. And for the high value contacts, maybe get someone in customer support or customer experience or customer relations to maybe give them a call or contact them, through other channels. We'll get into the engagement bit proper in a different video, because we'll then look at how you create your automation flows, the messaging bit and all of that. That's really about it. So the first step again to creating your reactivation automation is identifying when users churn. We've talked about that. The second step is engaging them to win them back, meaning create your workflows that automatically just connects to your segment. And as people are added, as customers are added to that segment, your automation workflow picks it up from there and sends them the right message. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video where we talk about the engagement bit. If you have questions, you can send me an email. You can send it to hello@engage.so, and I will definitely answer and get back to you. Thanks so much. Bye.